Hello, I'm Clive Paget and I'm the features editor for Musical America. On today's one-to-one, I'm going to be talking to Sir Nicholas Kenyon, who is soon to leave London's Barbican Centre after nearly 14 years as managing director. We'll be discussing the highs and lows of running one of Europe's largest arts complexes, as well as looking at how arts management has changed during his time at the top. He'll also talk about what he sees as the future for classical music in a competitive multi-genre arts world, and why he's decided to return to the role of opera critic, writing for one of the UK's leading daily newspapers. Hi, Nick. It's great to talk to you.
Hello, Clive. Great to be here.
I'd like to talk about the Barbican, first of all. You've been there for 14 years, I believe. Was there a particular reason why you've chosen now to leave?
Well, look, with these big jobs and the effect that one has on people's taste, I think there's honestly a limit to the amount of time any one person should do them. I did 12 seasons of BBC Proms, and that felt exactly right in terms of getting your ideas into the system, developing them, broadening the agenda as one wanted, and so on.
We've recently learned that you're going to be the new opera critic at the Telegraph here in the UK. Was that were those two decisions linked? What made you throw your hat in the ring for that job?
Well, as you know, and indeed as people in America, if they know anything at all about me, which is very unlikely, what they will maybe recall is that many years ago I was a music critic for The New Yorker for a very, very happy 3-year period when Andrew Porter was off doing other things. And writing has always been something that's been very close to my heart. And so at the back of my mind, I was always feeling that I wanted to stop doing this job when it wasn't too late to do something else and to both return to writing, but also to academic research and the sort of criticism that one hasn't been able to do while doing a full-time management job. And just to go back to the maths for a minute, it is since I went to the BBC to run Radio 3 in 1992, that's virtually 3 decades of management, which wasn't actually something that I set out to do at all. I think of myself as someone in the musical world who wants to make things happen, and that was a great way to be able to do that. So no, it was pure serendipity that the Telegraph opera job, which has been occupied for many years by the notable critic Rupert Christensen, just came up and became an opportunity at the moment that I was leaving the Barbican. So it was a very happy coincidence.
Back to the Barbican. In terms of job satisfaction, how would you say that has compared with, say, your time running the Proms or BBC Radio 3?
Well, there are totally different in terms of the satisfactions and the problems and the challenges, but one thing links them, which is they are in direct contact with an audience. And you could tell running the Proms, going to Proms night after night, what was working and what wasn't working, what really struck a chord with the audience and what was less satisfactory. And equally at the Barbican, where I've expanded into all the art forms, that question of the relationship with the audience has been so satisfying and so important to see an audience responding to the new, the innovative, the different, all sorts of things which one wouldn't necessarily have expected. And of course, I was coming at that, particularly from the other art forms, with a very open mind and was relying at the Barbican totally on the judgment and expertise of the heads of the various art forms. We've had across my time really marvellous heads of music, theatre, visual arts, cinema, and so on. And those are the people who do the on the ground research, the on the ground relationships with the talent, and know what will work and, of course, what will sell for an audience.
Can we talk a little bit about the highs and lows? Maybe the artistic highs first of all.
The artistic highs have been amazing. If you think that the Barbican from the beginning has had this close relationship with the London Symphony Orchestra, which came in at the very start of the Barbican in March 1982, so has been the resident orchestra all that time. And this last period for the LSO has been a really golden period, with conductors of the stature of Colin Davis, Valery Gergiev, and most recently Simon Rattle. And that's something which we very much hope will continue into the future, with Simon continuing a relationship with the LSO, but the principal conductorship passing on to Antonio Pappano, who is such a beloved figure in London at the Royal Opera House. And I think the low points, obviously, are things that just don't take off, as I was mentioning, with the audience to the same extent. And this whole past year has been a low point to that extent.
Yeah,
In that we simply haven't been able to do what we are there to do.
I'll get onto that in a moment. I'm curious, but what about from a managerial or a kind of financial perspective? What have been the kind of major hurdles that you've had to kind of overcome?
Well, the simple answer to that is money, money, and money. Um, it's always been a challenge for the Barbican, which is an amazingly diverse and complex institution running all these different venues and different art forms, to live within its means. And at the same time, the City of London Corporation, who everybody regards as limitlessly wealthy, but that is not the case at all, has been gradually reducing the amount of subsidy that it puts into the Barbican, in very much the same way as the Arts Council has been reducing the amounts of subsidy that it puts into the other major organisations in the UK. So it was a challenge for us to say, how can we maintain and develop and enliven the offer to the public at a time of declining subsidy without in any way reducing the ambition and scope of what we do. And as far as we were concerned, there was quite a simple answer to that, which was we had to earn more from the building. And that was a huge benefit to us in terms of the fact that the Barbican, was an absolutely utopian creation when it was built back in 1982, but it is surprisingly adaptable in being able to host events and functions, and of course being there in the city, the whole business of it being a convener of the business of the city is another huge advantage that we have had. So the clearest way to explain what the change that you refer to was, when I arrived, the balance of money was roughly 60% subsidy from the city and 40% earned income, both from business events, from the box office, and from the development function. So what we've done over the years is to flip that. So the city subsidy now accounts for about 40%, whereas earned income accounts for about 60%. And that is...
Over that time, has your budget generally increased, presumably?
Oh, yes. So we are, or at least we were before the moment of COVID, essentially a 48 million pound business. And it's that which the balance between earned income and what we call subsidy, but what is actually really investment in the cultural life of the country, that's what the city is providing. And that was a really good balance, and it enabled us to be able to carry on doing innovative things which the Barbican promoted, while at the same time hosting commercial events which were contributing to the bottom line and building audiences. So that was really a win-win. That was really a difference from going from a proposition that the Barbican was about world-class arts. That was the proposition that I inherited from my predecessors, and very successfully too. I wanted to shift that to world-class arts and learning.
I'm interested to know what your take is on how classical music has fared as part of a kind of multi-arts genre institution. I mean, a lot of people will be concerned that maybe classical music is losing ground. Over the last 14 years, how would you say that has been affected, and how do you see it going forward in the future?
You're absolutely right to identify it as an issue, but actually, the place of classical music in a multi arts centre like the Barbican has, we feel, been really strengthened through these years, because we have an amazingly diverse programme in which classical music has a natural place. We have diverse audiences in which classical music has a natural place. And it's been very noticeable that our music team has moved away from categorizing classical music as a separate genre and moving it into a situation where, it's all music now. And so the very wide range of musical offerings which the Barbican is able to do, both through the LSO but through our own international orchestral relationships, notable among which is the Los Angeles Philharmonic and Gustavo Dudamel, getting them into and partnering them with the whole learning activity of the centre has been really invigorating, because our aims match so closely. Then you've got the non-classical music, which the Barbican also presents alongside the classical music season, world music, jazz, folk, and an increasing amount of what you might call crossover, though I never like the term crossover because it implies a dilution. What we're talking about is really high level crossover. And so I think what's happening with classical music is it is finding its place, and it is absolutely a key part of what we do. But as I say, I think it's almost easiest for us as a very mixed venue to have classical music as part of that mixed. I sometimes feel for the classical music only venues that they have a huge challenge on their hands in this respect.
I mean, you're a classical music person fundamentally. Have you ever felt you've had to fight classical music's corner?
Well, look, let's get this in proportion. I think people would say that classical music has had an extraordinarily privileged life in terms of the big institutions, both in the UK and in the US and many other countries. It has had the lion's share of subsidy and investment and support, and absolutely, when that is supported by audience enthusiasm, it is completely right and proper. But we have to be continually broadening the scope of what classical music does and what it is. Now, where I have had to fight the corner, and I think we all have to fight the corner, is in education and the perception that classical music is not an important thing for the younger generation to get to grips with.
Let's talk a little bit about the pandemic, which we all seem to talk about endlessly. So I won't ask you so much about what happened, because I presume, like most venues, you absolutely closed down. I'm more interested about what's happening now and how you see yourself coming out. I mean, is it going to be a relatively smooth ride back to normal now, do you think, or are there still hurdles to overcome?
I do not think we should talk about it as a ride back to normal. I think the pandemic has changed things in quite a fundamental way, and we may have to reassess what normal, in quotes, actually means. Of course, we want audiences to return, we want activity to return, but it may be on a slightly different basis. Will international touring ever be the same as it was before? I slightly doubt. All sorts of other aspects in terms of um, responding to local communities, climate change, sustainability. These are big questions which the pandemic has raised, and I think we need to really address. And I mean, that's one of the reasons why it's probably a good idea for a person of a different generation to address those challenges now for the Barbican.
I
I
mean,
think it'll flourish, but potentially in a different way.
looking at the books going forward, do you get a sense that people will be returning as you would hope they would, or do you feel there's still a reluctance?
Um, yes, I think there will be an enormous thirst to return to live cultural activity. That we are very confident about, and that we have made a big thing at the Barbican of making sure that when audiences come back, they are safe, they feel safe and secure. And 97% of our audiences have said they feel safe or very safe. So that is a really good base to build on. What isn't so sure is, are people going to come back to work? Because the whole working from home scenario, and I'm sure that's true in the US as well, has been an enormously attractive proposition to some. Very difficult for others who are, struggling with unsatisfactory working conditions. But I think again, there's going to be a different balance which won't be the same as it was before the pandemic. And if I can mention just quickly one other thing that will be very different, we have all, and this has equally been true on many of the American organizations that I follow, um, got to a different place in terms of digital offer to our audiences. And so I think there's a big question as to how will you blend the digital offer continuing through a period when live audiences are coming back. And that's going to be a really interesting challenge. But we've got some live from the Barbican events on our website, for instance, which were filmed during lockdown and are showing a really new way of being able to use the hall, film concerts in a much more flexible way. I'm really proud of what we managed to achieve with those live events in lockdown.
You mentioned the challenge of international touring and in regard to the pandemic, but obviously there is another, the elephant in the room there being Brexit. Do you feel that there is any progress being made in Brexit in that respect? And how do you think there's going to be movement? Will those problems be solved?
There will have to be movement, but all one can say is that it is painfully slow and it is painfully difficult to bring those cultural issues to the top of the government's agenda when there are so many other Brexit issues clamouring for attention.
Yeah,
Food on the shelves, the supply chain,
yeah.
all that. And we have had some notable successes. The LSO managed to travel to Aix-en-Provence and to do a Tristan with Simon Rattle this summer. It is getting better and it is working to a degree, but you hear so many awful stories about how difficult it is for audiences to travel, for artists to travel around Europe and to do what they previously could do so easily. So, yes, I am confident, but I don't think it's moving fast enough at the moment.
Um, Last couple of questions. First of all, what tips might you have for your successors? I believe currently it's successors plural. Is that correct?
The interim arrangements, as I am leaving now in order to start at the Telegraph and to do other things, the interim arrangements are for two of my colleagues, yes, to take over as interim managing directors while the process of finding a successor unfolds. So my only tips are: listen. What do people want? That is absolutely critical. Be bold, be adventurous, and take risks, and be prepared to fail. I think that's something which has become so difficult in a risk-averse culture that we live in. But failure has always been a part of the artistic landscape. When you think of the number of great works that have survived the years, so many more haven't. And that is not a bad thing, that's a good thing, because it's been a process by which people have come to value these great products of past centuries. Mm. So I think, take risks within the economic realities that are there. You can't, just chuck it all away, but you can scope it so that, there are absolute things that are certain to keep us going and things where we can take risks. And there I would involve a much more radical approach to equality and inclusion, and working with communities and working with young people and allowing them to participate in the business of making art.
So Nicholas Kenyon, thank you very much. It's been fascinating to talk to you.
Thank you very much, Clive. Very good to talk to you.